The golden hues of autumn painted the small town of Willowbrook in warm, flickering light as 10-year-old Lucas Mercer sat on the creaky wooden porch of his grandfather's farmhouse, his chin resting heavily in his hands. The air smelled of fallen leaves and wood smoke, a scent that should have been comforting. But to Lucas, it only reminded him of how much his life had changed. His parents' divorce had been swift and painful. One day, he was in his familiar suburban home, surrounded by school friends and the hum of city life. The next, he was here, in a quiet rural town where the nearest neighbor was half a mile away. His mother had moved across the country for a new job, and his father had barely said goodbye before disappearing into his own world of work and silence. Lucas kicked at a loose pebble, sending it skittering across the gravel driveway. His grandfather, a kind but stoic man named Henry, had done his best to make him feel welcome. But the old farmer wasn't much for conversation, and the long stretches of silence in the house made Lucas feel even more alone. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, Lucas heard a rustling in the bushes near the edge of the property. He froze, listening. Then, a low, cautious whine. His heart jumped. Slowly, a large, muscular dog emerged from the underbrush. A German shepherd, his coat a striking mix of deep red and black, like embers in a dying fire. His ears were alert, but his body was tense, as if ready to bolt at the slightest threat. His golden eyes locked onto Lucas, wary but curious. Lucas held his breath. He had always loved dogs, but his parents had never allowed one. Now here was this beautiful creature, standing just a few feet away, watching him. "Hey there," Lucas murmured softly, keeping his voice gentle. "Where'd you come from?" The dog didn't move, but his tail gave the faintest twitch. Lucas slowly extended his hand, palm up. "It's okay, I won't hurt you." For a long moment, the shepherd just stared. Then with deliberate steps, he approached. His nose brushed against Lucas's fingers, sniffing cautiously before nudging them with a quiet, almost hesitant trust. Lucas's chest tightened with emotion. He didn't know where this dog had come from, but in that instant, he felt something shift inside him, a spark of connection, of understanding. "Grandpa," Lucas called, still keeping his voice soft so as not to startle the dog. "Come look." Henry stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands on an old rag. His eyebrows lifted at the sight of the large shepherd. "Well, I'll be. Where'd he come from?" "I don't know," Lucas admitted. "He just showed up." Henry studied the dog with a practiced eye. No collar, looks a little thin, might have been dumped out here. Lucas's stomach twisted at the thought. "Can we keep him?" Henry sighed, rubbing his stubbled chin. "Lucas, taking in a stray ain't like feeding a barn cat. Dogs need attention, training." "Please," Lucas whispered, his fingers still buried in the dog's thick fur. "I'll take care of him, I promise." Henry looked between the boy and the dog, then finally nodded. "All right, but he's your responsibility. Food, walks, baths, all of it." Lucas beamed. "Thank you." The dog, as if sensing the decision, leaned into Lucas's touch, his tail giving a slow, tentative wag. Lucas grinned. "I'm gonna call you Rusty." And just like that, in the fading light of an autumn evening, a lonely boy and a lost dog found each other, and neither would ever be alone again. The first few weeks with Rusty were a delicate dance of patience and understanding. Lucas quickly learned that his new companion carried invisible scars, a flinch at raised voices, a wary glance at brooms leaning against walls, and a hesitation before entering any room. These subtle reactions told a story Lucas could only guess at, one of harsh words and harsher hands. Each morning before school, Lucas would fill 2 bowls, one with kibble, the other with fresh water, placing them carefully on the porch where Rusty could approach in his own time. At first, the shepherd would only eat when Lucas stepped back several paces, golden eyes flickering between the food and the boy. But as days passed, the distance between them shrank, until one crisp October morning when Rusty ate with Lucas sitting right beside him, one small hand resting lightly on the dog's shoulder. Grandpa Henry watched this slow courtship with quiet approval. "That there's a working dog," he remarked one evening, as Rusty herded a stray chicken back to the coop with surprising instinct. "Got intelligence in those eyes. Someone put time into training him once." "Then why would they abandon him?" Lucas asked, fingers tightening in Rusty's ruff. Henry's face darkened. "Some folks don't deserve dogs, son. Just like some don't deserve kids." The unspoken comparison to Lucas's own parents hung heavy in the air until Rusty nudged the boy's hand, demanding attention and breaking the tension. Their daily routine became sacred. Mornings began with Rusty waiting by Lucas's bed, his cold nose an insistent alarm clock. After school, they'd explore the winding creek behind the property, where Rusty would splash through the shallows while Lucas skipped stones. The dog developed an uncanny ability to sense Lucas's moods, pressing close when homework frustration creased the boy's brow, or playfully stealing his mitten when winter's gloom settled too heavily. The first real test of their bond came during a November thunderstorm. Lucas awoke to the crash of thunder shaking the old farmhouse, his bedroom illuminated in strobe-like flashes. Before he could even call out, a trembling weight launched itself onto his bed. Rusty, usually so composed, now pressed shaking against Lucas's side, his breath coming in panicked huffs. "It's okay, boy," Lucas murmured, wrapping his arms around the quivering dog. He recalled Grandpa mentioning how some abused dogs develop storm phobias. "You're safe here." For hours they stayed like that, Lucas whispering nonsense stories while stroking Rusty's ears until the storm passed and the dog's breathing evened out. When morning light filtered through the curtains, Lucas found Rusty's head resting protectively across his chest, the dog's warm weight a comforting anchor. That weekend, Lucas used his allowance to buy a thick dog bed at the feed store. He placed it right beside his own bed, though more often than not, he'd wake to find Rusty curled against him, the expensive bed untouched. Some nights when memories of his fractured family kept him awake, Lucas would slip down to the floor, pressing his back against Rusty's solid warmth, and finally find sleep. By the time winter's first snow blanketed Willowbrook, their bond had become the stuff of local legend. Folks at the general store would smile when Lucas pedaled up on his bike with Rusty loping alongside. The school bus driver began making an unscheduled stop at the farm's mailbox after seeing how the shepherd would wait there every afternoon, ears pricking at the first diesel rumble in the distance. One particularly bitter January day, Lucas returned home to find Rusty waiting as usual, but with something clamped gently in his jaws. "What you got there, buddy?" Lucas knelt as Rusty deposited a single red mitten at his feet. Recognition flashed through him. This was the mate to the one he'd lost weeks ago during a snowball fight near the creek. Grandpa Henry chuckled from the porch. "That dog's been digging near the creek bank every afternoon. Reckon he's been on a rescue mission." Lucas buried his face in Rusty's neck, inhaling the familiar scent of snow and dog. "You remembered," he whispered. In that moment, he understood. While humans might fail each other, the loyalty of this noble creature was absolute. And as the long winter wore on, that knowledge became the warmth that sustained them both. The fire started in the dead of night, when February's grip had turned the world brittle and dry. Later, investigators would determine it began in the old wiring of the equipment barn, a spark in ancient insulation that smoldered for hours before finding the hay stored for winter feeding. Lucas slept deeply, exhausted from a day of sledding and snow forts. Rusty, however, lay awake on his bed, ears twitching at the unfamiliar popping sounds coming from the far side of the farmyard. When the first tendrils of smoke reached the house, the shepherd was on his feet instantly. Nose working as instincts honed through generations sounded an internal alarm. Upstairs, Lucas dreamed of summer days as Rusty bounded to his bedside. Unlike his usual gentle nudges, the dog clamped down on Lucas's pajama sleeve with urgent pressure, pulling with all his considerable strength. "Rusty? Wha?" Lucas's question dissolved into coughing as he inhaled a lungful of smoke. The reality of their situation hit like ice water. The hallway glowed orange under the door, and the ominous crackle of flames underscored the smoke alarm's shrill screams. Rusty didn't wait for comprehension. He bodily herded Lucas toward the window, barking in sharp, commanding bursts that cut through the boy's disorientation. The old farmhouse's second-story drop would have been dangerous under normal circumstances, but the blanket of snow from yesterday's storm provided a merciful landing. "Grandpa!" Lucas screamed as he tumbled into the snowbank, immediately scrambling to his feet. Rusty hit the ground beside him and without hesitation bolted back toward the house. The scene unfolded in nightmarish slow motion. Flames had engulfed the barn completely and were licking at the house's siding. Henry appeared at his bedroom window just as Rusty reached the back porch, the old man coughing violently as he struggled with the warped window frame. What happened next would be recounted at the firehouse for years to come. Rusty scaled the porch railing in one powerful leap, balancing precariously as he reached Henry's windowsill. The old man, seeing the dog's determination, wrapped his hands in Rusty's collar as the shepherd launched backward, their combined weight finally breaking the window seal. They fell together into the snow just as the roof over Henry's bedroom collapsed inward with a roar of sparks. Sirens wailed in the distance as neighbors arrived. Lucas, sobbing uncontrollably, buried his hands in Rusty's fur, checking for burns as the dog panted heavily, but remained alert, still watching the burning house as if expecting another threat. Fire Chief Wilkins knelt beside them once the worst was contained. "That dog of yours is something special," he said, nodding toward Rusty. "Smoke detectors only go off when it's too late. He knew before any of us." The days that followed were a blur of temporary housing and insurance paperwork. Through it all, Rusty never left Lucas's side, his steady presence a bulwark against the shock and displacement. When they were finally allowed to sift through the ruins, Lucas found his most prized possession miraculously intact. A framed photo of him and Rusty from last summer's county fair. The glass cracked, but the image untouched. As spring came to Willowbrook and rebuilding began, Lucas often caught townspeople giving Rusty admiring glances or even stopping to pet him. The shepherd accepted the attention with dignified patience, though his eyes always tracked Lucas's movements. They'd been through fire together now, in every sense, and what emerged from those ashes was a bond forged in courage and sacrifice. Unshakable, unbreakable. High school graduation came faster than Lucas expected. Standing in the farmyard in his cap and gown, he smiled as Grandpa Henry fumbled with the camera, while Rusty sat patiently beside him, his muzzle gone nearly white with age. At 13, the once vibrant shepherd moved slower now, his hips stiff with arthritis, though his eyes still held that same intelligent spark. "Hold still," Henry grumbled, squinting through the viewfinder. "Rusty, make him stop fidgeting." As if understanding, Rusty leaned his weight against Lucas's leg, causing the young man to laugh and automatically reach down to scratch those familiar ears. The moment crystallized, the golden afternoon light, the scent of freshly cut grass, the comfortable weight against his thigh, and Lucas felt the bittersweet pang of impending change. In 3 months, he'd be leaving for State University to study veterinary medicine. The acceptance letter had arrived with a scholarship, thanks in part to the essay he'd written about the night of the fire. Only one shadow dimmed his excitement. Rusty wouldn't be going with him. That evening, as Lucas packed boxes in his room, Rusty lay on the bed, watching with those soulful eyes. The dog had been unusually clingy lately, following Lucas from room to room, as if sensing their time together was growing short. "You'll be fine here with Grandpa," Lucas reassured him, sitting on the edge of the bed. Rusty immediately rested his head in Lucas's lap, exhaling a deep sigh. "I'll come home every break, and it's only 4 years." But even as he said it, Lucas felt the lump in his throat. 4 years was nearly a third of Rusty's lifespan. He buried his face in the dog's fur, breathing in the familiar scent that had been his comfort through adolescence. The campus was only 2 hours away, making weekend visits possible. Each homecoming sent Rusty into puppy-like exuberance, despite his stiff joints. Lucas would spend those precious hours brushing his old friend, taking slow walks to the creek, or simply sitting together on the porch as the seasons turned. During his sophomore year, the call came on a rainy November night. Grandpa's voice was gruff but strained. "You'd better come home, son. Rusty's not doing so good." Lucas made the drive in record time, his stomach in knots. The vet had been to the farm already. Kidney failure, common in older shepherds. There were treatments, but they would only buy time, not quality. For 3 days, Lucas barely left Rusty's side, sleeping on the floor next to the dog's bed. He hand-fed Rusty small pieces of chicken, helped him outside when needed, and spent hours just talking, reminiscing about their adventures. On the 4th morning, Rusty refused even water. His breathing had become labored, though his tail still thumped weakly when Lucas entered the room. The look in those golden eyes was unmistakable. It was time. Dr. Wilkins came to the farmhouse that afternoon. Lucas carried Rusty to his favorite spot under the old oak tree, the autumn leaves drifting down around them like burnt gold. As the sedative took effect, Lucas cradled the dog's head in his lap, stroking those beloved ears one last time. "I love you, buddy," he whispered as Rusty's breathing slowed. "You were the best friend I ever had." When the end came, it was peaceful, with Lucas's tears falling onto fur that no longer rose and fell with life. They buried Rusty on the hill overlooking the creek, his grave marked with a simple stone engraved with his name and dates. That night, alone in his childhood room for the first time in years, Lucas expected overwhelming grief. Instead, as he stared at the empty dog bed beside him, what flooded in was gratitude for every muddy paw print, every game of fetch, every silent moment of understanding. Rusty had been more than a pet. He'd been Lucas's anchor through life's storms, his first true experience of unconditional love. As sleep finally claimed him, Lucas could have sworn he felt the familiar weight of a dog settling at the foot of his bed. And for the first time since that morning, he smiled. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for Rusty's Haven Animal Shelter fell on a perfect spring day, 10 years to the week after Lucas had buried his best friend. The newly constructed facility gleamed in the sunlight, its spacious kennels and play yards already filled with wagging tails and hopeful eyes. Lucas, now Dr. Mercer, stood before the small crowd of townspeople and supporters. At his side was a young German Shepherd mix named Ember, one of their first rescue cases. The dog sat patiently as cameras flashed, her calm demeanor belying the horrific neglect she'd endured before coming to them. "This shelter isn't just about giving animals a second chance," Lucas said, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. He reached down unconsciously to stroke Ember's head. "It's about honoring the transformative power of the human-animal bond. Every dog here has the potential to change a life, just as one very special shepherd changed mine." A murmur of recognition ran through the older attendees, those who remembered the brave dog who'd saved 2 generations of Mercers. Lucas's gaze drifted to the hillside beyond the shelter where a simple memorial garden had been planted. At its center stood a bronze statue of a German Shepherd, head held high, ears alert. After the ceremony, as guests toured the facilities, an elderly man approached Lucas. "That your dog?" he asked, nodding to the statue. Lucas smiled. "That's Rusty. He, well, he saved my life in more ways than one." The old man chuckled. "Funny how the best ones always find us when we need them most." He reached into his coat pocket. "I think you should have this." In his weathered hand lay a faded photograph, a much younger version of the man standing beside a German shepherd that could have been Rusty's twin. His name was Baron. "Best working dog I ever had. Disappeared back in 2009 during a storm. Always figured someone took him." Lucas's breath caught. The timeline matched. The resemblance was uncanny. He looked from the photo to the old man's face, seeing the same mix of grief and gratitude he'd carried for a decade. "Thank you," Lucas said sincerely, "for sharing this with me. Would you like to meet Ember? She's looking for a retirement home." As the old man knelt stiffly to greet the shepherd, his gnarled hands gentle on her face, Lucas felt something settle inside him. The circle was complete. Where once a lost dog had found a broken boy, now a rescued dog would comfort a lonely man. And somewhere beyond the veil, he liked to imagine a familiar pair of golden eyes watching approvingly. That evening, as Lucas locked up the shelter, Ember trotted happily beside her new owner to a waiting car. The sunset painted the memorial garden in warm hues, casting long shadows from the bronze statue across the freshly turned earth of the shelter's future. Some bonds, Lucas reflected as he turned toward home, truly were unbreakable. They simply changed form, from paw prints on hardwood to memories in the heart, from a single remarkable dog to countless lives saved in his name. And in that transformation, love endured. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales like this. Until next time, take care.